Hey, what's up, family, and welcome to the 105th episode of Tone's Take, and it is brought to you by the Queen Bee, Beyonce. I mean, she's been slaying as she usually does. Apparently at Coachella, it was no different. But for those of you who weren't following the events of Coachella or the events in Syria and all of Donald Trump's crazy tweets, you may have missed this article about the, what is he, like a congressman or basically a famed lawyer, nationally known in the gay rights community. He's a gay rights activist. His name is David Buckel, and he is also really serious about the environment. Actually, you know, he hates fossil fuels, as I do. I do share that hate from him. I hate fossil fuels, and I hate what they have done to our environment, basically destroying our environment and making it harder for people to live and breathe free, clean air. Reading from CBS, basically a well-known gay rights lawyer and environmental activist appeared to have burned himself to death, and I must warn you, this next image I will show is pretty gruesome, so if you don't like seeing charred bodies, I would say please do turn away. But this image comes from Amy Hamberry on Twitter, who I have referenced up here. This is basically the charred remains of David Buckel. Again, he burned himself to death in an act of what is called self-immolation as a protest to everything that's happening to the environment. He left a couple of letters. The Daily News reports that he left a suicide note in a shopping cart near his body that said he hoped his death was honorable and might serve others. And then the New York Times said it received an email copy of the note, which also said most humans on the planet now breathe air made unhealthy by fossil fuels, and most die early deaths as a result. My early death by fossil fuel reflects what we are doing to ourselves, and it is, you know, pretty crazy. This article also goes on to talk about how he has fought for LGBT rights. He apparently there was a movie after him or about his actions, and the movie Boys Don't Cry, which came out in 1999, in which Hilary Swank won an Academy Award for her portrayal as Brandon Teena, a transgender man who was murdered in Nebraska. So, and he had basically a lot to do as the attorney in this case. But it's just pretty crazy that this is the route that he decided to take to protest our environmental rights. I don't know. As someone who's worked in the renewable energy field, I don't really feel like it's gone that far. And I feel like there's been a lot of work done. Granted, the Trump administration has taken steps backwards when it comes to the Paris agreement on climate change. But he's only going to be in office for 4 years, hopefully not the full 8 years, maybe even less than 4 years. Who knows? He might get out of office next year. Fingers crossed, right? But I just don't think that killing oneself, especially in the matter in which you burn yourself to death, is the way to go. Now, for those of you who don't know it, and I didn't know, so I did some research myself, you know, the history of self-immolation dates back centuries. I actually, you know, looked at a Time article from 2011, which, you know, basically started off with this very first act of suicide by burning oneself, and it's a legend where and I'll read it to you. The first instance is said to come from Sati. He was one of the wives of the Hindu god Shiva. According to myth, she married against her father's wishes and then burned herself to death after her father insulted her husband. So again, that's not really a political reason, but that was probably the first time someone burned themselves to death. What's more recent is maybe if you didn't know, the first most famous moment in which this article says Thich Quang Duc in 1963 under the rule of Ngo Dinh Diem in South Vietnam, largely advanced the agenda of the country's Catholic minority, discriminated against Buddhist monks, and in one of the most dramatic instances of individual protest, Quang Duc doused himself in gasoline in the middle of Saigon Street and lit himself ablaze. So this was probably the first what they call agitprop, or which is basically self-immolation in the name of a political cause, or in this case it was a political religious cause. And then you know, most recently, this young man here who basically, and according to this Time article, Mohammed Bouazizi, set himself aflame on December 17th in 2010, I believe it was. And as this article says, he sparked flames far greater than the ones that would ultimately kill him. He was a Tunisian man. He was unemployed college graduate. He was an unemployed college graduate with children to feed, and he tried finding work hawking vegetables, but was thwarted by police who confiscated his cart. And in a grisly act of protest and anguish, Bouazizi doused himself in gasoline and set himself aflame. And this act is basically what many people say triggered the current political crisis at the time in Tunisia, which ousted the president the next year, January 14th of 2011. So again, there is a history of, you know, self-immolation, and Buddhists and Tibetan monks are most known to do this in the protest of occupation by the Chinese and their lands, or, you know, just other people that are in their lands and things like that. And so this isn't out of the ordinary in general and recently, but it is kind of crazy to see it happen in the U.S., especially for an environmental cause, because this is something that actually does affect us all, and it pretty much goes unnoticed to many people because, hey, you're breathing fresh air, or so you think, but there are a lot of companies out there that are doing their best to make sure that governments around the world do not enact strict environmental regulations. And during the Obama administration, there was a lot of work done, seemingly, that would have reversed some of those effects, especially putting more renewables in the atmosphere, or not in the atmosphere, but renewables like solar, renewables like wind power, and clean geothermal and things like that. And then a lot of that kind of went reverse, especially here in the United States. So while I don't condone this man's actions, I do feel sorry for him and those close to him, and if he had any family, I feel really sorry for them as well, as I'm not sure if they told him or what really has happened after that. His body being found by a couple of runners through the park must have been pretty crazy to see, a person set on fire. But that's really what I wanted to talk about today. Let me know what you guys' thoughts are on, you know, setting yourself on fire for this. It seems crazy, so yeah, just let me know. But yeah, rest in peace, David Buckel, and hopefully we see a future in which we are not destroying our environment. So hopefully, if anything, his death is not in vain. But that's all I've got for you all today. I will see you tomorrow. Peace out.